So let's take a look at part 3 of topic 14, infections of the human body. We're going to talk about infections of the digestive system. So what kind of organisms are we talking about here? There are a huge number of organisms as well. You notice I have the ones in bold, the ones that we've talked about. So Staphylococcus, Enterococcus, E.coli can all be found in the large intestine. The significant pathogens, you can see that we have Helicobacter here, Neisseria, and Amoeba, Trichomonas, E. coli, Clostridium, Candida, and Amoeba. So all sorts of organisms that we have talked about already. So the digestive system, of course, starts off with the mouth, and I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the mouth. There are many organisms that live in your mouth, maybe 400, maybe 1,000. I've seen different studies that give all sorts of different numbers. The most important ones are the ones, of course, that your dentist is telling you about. And these are organisms that can live on your teeth, and they can live there in biofilms. And that's why we need to brush, and that's why we need to floss. One of the significant organisms here that's important in dental decay right here is a Streptococcus organism, Streptococcus mutans. This one here produces an acid, and that acid, of course, leads to the breakdown of your tooth enamel. That's the one that your dentist warns you about. That's why they want you to brush your teeth, rinse your mouth after you eat or consume acidic beverages, and floss your teeth. One we've talked about already is this one here, Helicobacter pylori. So remember, this organism here lives in your stomach. It is one of the few organisms that doesn't just pass through the stomach, but actually wants to live in the acidic environment of your stomach. So what is significant about this one here? It's associated with peptic ulcers and in some cases stomach cancer. So notice this number here. About half of us in Canada are carriers of this organism, but most of us are asymptomatic. Some of us may develop stomach cancers or ulcers. Some of us may be fine for the rest of our lives. We don't really understand exactly all the details around this organism, why some people get sick and other people, actually the strains seem to protect them against cancers. So there's lots of interesting questions regarding this particular organism. Okay, so let's go a little deeper down into the digestive system and let's talk about diarrhea. Yay, diarrhea! I know everyone loves talking about diarrhea. So what is diarrhea? It basically means your stool is looser than usual, maybe more bowel movements and more water in the bowel movements. You can think about diarrhea as really two different types of symptoms. One is gastroenteritis. This is diarrhea that's basically just loose, no pus, mucus, or blood. We can also talk about dysentery, which means diarrhea that may have blood and mucus and things like that in it. If you think about the symptoms between these two types of diarrhea, we have vomiting, cramps, nausea, and the big one here is risk for dehydration. This is what can cause death or at least severe illness in a lot of individuals. So what are the common causes of diarrhea? Gastroenteritis, we're looking at E. coli, Clostridium, Salmonella, norovirus, Giardia. You can see there are other ones on there. I'm just focusing on the organisms that we talked about in this class. Dysentery, E. coli 0157, so the serious one that we've been talking about. And Entamoeba histolytica, so that's the amoeba that causes amoebic dysentery. So just a reminder about all of these different E. colis. I gave you this big list of all these different E. colis out there that exist. I kind of just wanted to remind you about these. Is the biggest differences. I don't expect you to know the difference between E-tech and E-pec and E-hec and all that. Just know that these different types of E. coli have different types of virulence factors. They have different toxins, they have different villi, things that make them pathogenic. This is why these ones are pathogenic and normal E. coli is not, because they have all those extra virulence factors. The important one to know about is this one here, E. coli 0157. This is the one that is spread by cattle and can cause very, very serious disease. The main type of E. coli illness that people get in Canada is this one here, the one that is responsible for traveler's diarrhea, or you can see the other name, backpacker's diarrhea. So the main cause of traveler's diarrhea is actually E. coli. So we're talking about fecal contamination of water. This is why they say when you go to Mexico, don't drink the water. Many other causes could be Salmonella, could be Giardia, could be Cryptosporidium. There are a bunch of other bacterial causes as well. Usually it's E. coli, and usually it clears up within a few days. If it doesn't clear up within a few days, then you may want to get yourself checked out for one of these things, Giardia or Cryptosporidium. So where might you get traveler's diarrhea? Really just any place in the world where the water sanitation is not so good. So according to this map, you can see all these places. Mexico is on there, many Caribbean and South American areas, Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. It varies country by country. I know, for example, Costa Rica, the water is very, very good there, and you can drink from the tap. So let's talk a little bit about Salmonella. I had mentioned there are many types of Salmonella. Salmonella typhimurium, for example, and I don't want to really distinguish between all the different types, so we're just going to kind of call them Salmonella. Not named after salmon the fish, but named after a person, Daniel Salmon. That's where the name comes from. And often Salmonella is also equated with what a lot of people call as food poisoning or food intoxication. So they're eating it with food that is contaminated with the organism. So what kind of food are we talking about? What kind of contamination? Usually fecal matter from birds or reptiles. So this is why it's important for people to cook their chicken, and if you've been in contact with somebody's pet turtle or pet snake, wash your hands. So what kind of symptoms are we talking about? Diarrhea, that's the usual gastrointestinal symptom. Abdominal cramps, sometimes significant pain. We can talk about nausea, fever, and a few other symptoms are pretty typical of Salmonella infections. Vomiting as well, of course. Diarrhea and vomiting tend to go hand in hand. So Salmonella is very good at living intracellularly. So take a look at this. These are some intestinal villi here. And these Salmonella are actually living inside the cell, which makes them very hard to treat. How do you treat that? Your immune system can't get at it. The drugs can't get at it. So mostly it's a matter of time. The immune system will actually get at it eventually. It just takes time. So you can see the note here. It says it induces fluid loss from the cells. That's why you get diarrhea and vomiting. Treatment. The drugs don't get in there. So often we're looking at rehydration and just treating the symptoms and letting the immune system slowly take care of those infected cells. Okay, so there are viruses that infect the digestive system. We have already talked about herpes, so oral herpes, of course, meaning cold sores. Herpes simplex 1 there. We haven't really talked about this other one here, mumps, at all this semester because, well, you know, nobody sees mumps anymore because it's prevented by vaccination. So it's the only thing I want you to know about mumps. It affects the salivary glands and can be prevented by vaccination. There's also norovirus, which I've mentioned a few times in passing. Notice sometimes it's called the stomach flu or the winter vomiting virus. So it's good to know those names because it goes by a bunch of different names. Sometimes people call it Norwalk virus because it was named after Norwalk, I believe, Connecticut. But the people there didn't like it named after their town, so they changed it to norovirus. So I want to spend a few minutes just talking about hepatitis. There's many different causes of hepatitis, and some of them are viral. So I want to talk about hepatitis A, B, and C. So what is hepatitis? Hepatitis, hep means liver cell, titis means inflammation, so this is inflammation of the liver. This can lead to a variety of symptoms such as jaundice, and in some severe cases can lead to liver cancer. So there are many viruses that cause hepatitis. I'll show you a slide in a moment. I've lost track of exactly how many hepatitis viruses there actually are. So the symptoms of hepatitis, usually acute, that means they come on quick, and sometimes they can be chronic, sometimes they can be short-lived. Depends on the type of hepatitis. So what are we looking at? Abdominal pain, jaundice, so jaundice is yellowing of the eyes and the skins, nausea and vomiting, so all these gastrointestinal symptoms, swollen abdomen, that's an inflammation of the liver, of course, itchy skin in some cases, and weight loss. and in some serious cases, chronic viral hepatitis can actually lead to liver cancer. So usually that's hepatitis B or hepatitis C that lead to liver cancer. So here's a handful of hepatitis viruses. I'm just going to talk about hepatitis A, hepatitis B, and hepatitis C. D and E are a lot less common. So here's hepatitis A. So notice that all of these viruses are very different viruses. The only thing they have in common is that they infect the liver and that they cause hepatitis. But in terms of the viral structure, they're very, very different. This is a positive stranded RNA virus. So hepatitis A is transmitted by contaminated feces. So we're looking at contaminated food and water, a lot more common in developing countries. Sometimes people do get it in Canada. Sometimes there's just some contaminated lettuce or something else ends up in a restaurant, and there are a few cases. It's very contagious. Thankfully, it's usually only a mild illness, and you can recover from hepatitis A. The other good news is there is a vaccine available. So if you're traveling to a place in the world that does not have good water or sanitation, I encourage you to get the hepatitis A vaccine. I believe it's 2 shots. This is a bit of the distribution of the hepatitis A virus, and you can see it's very similar to the one we're looking at with traveler's diarrhea in terms of water sanitation. Not sure what's going on up over here in Greenland, but looks like it's common in Greenland as well. So hepatitis B, notice this is a very different virus. This one has an envelope. This is a DNA virus. So hepatitis B is transmitted by blood. So very, very different transmission mechanism. This is actually very similar in fashion to HIV, so sexual contact, sharing needles, and those kind of things. The thing about hepatitis B is it's a relatively long incubation period, and people don't always know where they got it from, and can, in some cases, actually be connected with liver cancers. At the moment, there's no effective treatment for infection. The good news is there is a vaccine available for hepatitis B. I'm guessing, since most of you guys are relatively young, that you did get the hepatitis B vaccine in school when you were, I think, about grade 6 or 5 or something like that is when you get the hepatitis B vaccine. So that's good for you. Just want to talk a little bit about hepatitis C. It's a little less common, but sometimes there's confusion between hepatitis B and hepatitis C. So again, a very different type of virus. So this virus is transmitted mostly by intravenous drug use. I'm not really sure why, but the risk of from sexual contact for some reason is much lower, although it is possible. Again, it is transmitted by blood, but I'm not really sure why the case is, but it's very highly linked with intravenous drug use. This also is linked over many years to various types of liver cancers, so that is one of the biggest risks. The bad news is there's no vaccine available yet. The good news is that there is actually a cure for it now. Just a few years ago, they came out with some treatments for hepatitis C, and so people can actually get the virus cleared from these new medications. Okay, so I want to just talk about a few other gastrointestinal infections, and keep in mind most of these things are causing some sort of diarrhea or vomiting. So we talked about some protozoan diseases. So Giardia was a big one. Remember, it has 2 nuclei. There it is, looking right at you with its 2 nuclei. It has lots of flagella. We also talked about Cryptosporidium. So Giardia and Cryptosporidium are associated with animal feces. Giardia is called beaver fever for that reason, and Cryptosporidium a little bit more common with cow feces. We also talked about entamoeba causing, in some cases, dysentery. So one thing that these all have in common, whether it's bloody or non-bloody diarrhea, is that these protozoan diseases do cause diarrhea. We also talked about a number of parasitic worms. So we talked about tapeworms, and roundworms. Of course, roundworms include pinworms, which causes itchiness in the anal area, hookworms, which can cause anemia, and ascaris, which can cause intestinal blockage. The thing that the worms have in common is they don't usually cause diarrhea. Usually the symptoms are otherwise. Some cases, in the case of tapeworms, sometimes we don't even have gastrointestinal symptoms at all. So this is the end of part C of topic 14. infections of the human body.